Identity is not affirmation. Identity is demonstrated standard. Of course, your effort fails when your identity doesn't support it. And I think it's time to challenge the idea that harder work automatically creates change. Because it's deeper than that. It's the identity of how you see yourself being that's the real driver of consistent behavior. Hello there and welcome. My name is Kanchefu, and here we talk about personal development, in particular, life after therapy. If you're new here, make sure to press subscribe. But if not, welcome back. So, let us begin. Putting effort in without a strong or formed identity makes things harder because you're working off of a self that isn't in alignment with who you want to be or is in conflict with what you've heard about yourself, the name that have been placed upon you, the things and the beliefs that you think of yourself and possibly in your environment. Are you forcing behaviors that you don't identify with? Are you acting in a way that has been shown as an example from others or is in alignment with what you think is correct? And truly, where does that come from? Because actions feel unnatural when identity is misaligned. If you don't know what I mean by identity, I mean the way you see yourself, the things you believe are for you and who you are. That's what identity is. This makes me think that inconsistency, it must come from this internal contradiction, this internal conflict of self, of you. Because if you're doing one thing and you're saying another, if you're acting one way and you do another, who are you? What are you? What is right? What is wrong? That conflict is present, which could then lead to putting in more effort, but the follow through and the consistency behind that still remains unstable. It's almost as if your behavior keeps returning to that self-image of what is uncertain. But what if the real problem is you're acting against your identity? If you're uncertain of your identity, let's create some identity contract framework to support yourself moving forward. Let's define some principles. Your identity must be defined before the behaviors can be stabilized. In other words, who you are, what you do, what you think about yourself must have some sort of form before any habit takes place. Number 2, your standards must match the person you're becoming. You can't do one thing and then say another. You can't say one thing and do another. That inconsistency is going to continue to feel as if you're stagnant and lost and stuck all at the same time. And number 3 is repetition that creates the evidence of this new self. And evidence is what creates confidence. Okay, so we've got this principle of this framework about how to find your identity or build your identity. Let's make this more specific. Let's look at this identity statement. Define who you're choosing to become. Paragraph, sentence, on your phone, voice note, picture, whatever. If it's a mood board, define that person in every aspect of life. But make it specific and make it behavioral. What I mean by that is specific in terms of the process, the things that are said, the thoughts, the positive thoughts that I had, the resilience that is built, and the behavior, meaning the things that you do when you're in a certain environment, when you're in your mind thinking. Make that specific and remove any vague language. We don't want it to be any discrepancies of what exactly you mean for your identity. Number 2, we talked about your standards. So let's work on that. Set clear rules this identity follows. I do this, I do this, I do this, I do. That could be in accordance with your goal so that we're able to establish what this person does consistently. And most importantly, let's establish what this person does no longer tolerate at all. Part of a standard is not just this is what happens when this happens, but the other side, when things aren't met or followed through, what happens then? That's forming a very strong identity. And then we also talked about evidence, right? To reinforce this identity, your behavior must create evidence. The things you do must show that, okay, great, I'm becoming this person. Because it's in those repeated actions that your belief strengthens. You believe in yourself more, you do that action more, and it's a positive reinforcing cycle. But let's add one more step to that. An enforcement aspect. Hold your actions against this framework. You've built this person you want to be. You've made this standard. And now you're doing behaviors that evidence becoming this person. Now hold the actions you do on a day-to-day basis to that. There'll be times when your behavior, I could say the things that you do or the things that you say aren't in accordance and aligned with that. So correct it. And really treat this as a commitment, not a mood. Not a thing you're doing just for now, a phase. This is a lifelong journey of personal development, developing who you are to become what you want to become, to achieve what you want to achieve in your life. As we have these discussions, I often ask for you to think of an example. Describe somebody trying to be disciplined who doesn't see themselves as disciplined. What words do they say? What actions do they take? What things do they half accomplish? And then describe somebody who uses that framework we just discussed. How do they define themselves? What actions do they take? And what promises do they keep to themselves? That's contrast reflects where you once were to where you're now going. Got a challenge for you. Choose one identity this week you want to work on and write that identity statement as we discussed earlier. And within that identity statement, define one standard attached to that identity and now follow that for the next 7 days without exception. Track every promise kept and every promise missed and review whether your actions match that identity or not. And that's how I'm going to leave it today. If you enjoyed today's discussion, make sure to press subscribe and share this with a friend or family member you've had a conversation like this about. I'm sure they'll find this helpful. My name is Kanchefu. If you would like one-to-one support with your identity and creating an identity statement and taking the next steps forward, make sure to comment the word rebuild. I'm going to ask you this one question though. What identity are you acting again? My name is Kanchefu once more. Have a good day, morning, night or evening, for wherever you're in the world watching this, and I'll see you next week for our next discussion.